The moment everything changed. The room is quiet. The only sound is the faint hum of the city outside. Lauren Whitmore sits alone. Her voice is steady, but there's a weight to it. The weight of someone who has lived through something they never expected. She begins to speak. Her tone is reflective, raw, like she's finally ready to unburden herself. This is a story I never thought I'd share. Her voice is low but clear. It's about betrayal, temptation, and the moment my life spiraled out of control. It all started on a crowded metro ride. My name is Lauren Whitmore. I'm 42 years old. I've been married to Daniel Whitmore for almost 2 decades. He's a good man, hardworking, reliable, but somewhere along the way we stopped seeing each other. Not just physically, emotionally. I felt like I was fading into the background of my own life, like I was becoming invisible. Our son Ethan is 18. He's smart, kind, so much like his father. But even with him I felt the distance, like I was just going through the motions. Wake up, make breakfast, go to work, come home, repeat. It was as if I was living someone else's life, not mine. That Tuesday changed everything. That day on the metro was supposed to be ordinary. Just another Tuesday. Ethan and I were heading downtown. He had his headphones on, lost in his own world. And I was sitting there, staring out the window, wondering how I had ended up here. How I had become this person I barely recognized. And then, everything changed. This isn't just about what happened. It's about why it happened. About the choices I made. The people I hurt. And the person I became because of it. I take a deep breath. Steady myself. So if you're ready, I'll tell you everything. A love that once felt unbreakable. There was a time when Daniel and I were inseparable, I say. A faint smile in my voice. We met in college. He was the kind of guy who could light up a room just by walking into it. Confident. Charming. So sure of himself. And I was drawn to that. To him. We were young. In love. Convinced we could take on the world together. Our wedding day was perfect. Small. Intimate. Just the way we wanted it. I remember looking into his eyes and thinking, this is it. This is my person. And for a long time he was. We built a life together. A home. A family. But somewhere along the way, we lost each other. The slow unraveling. Daniel has always been a hard worker. Ambitious. And I admired that about him. But as the years went by, work became his everything. Late nights at the office. Weekend meetings. Business trips that stretched into weeks. First, I told myself it was just a phase. That he was doing it for us. For our future. But the truth is, I stopped feeling like a priority. I stopped feeling like I mattered. I tried to talk to him about it. More times than I can count. But every conversation ended the same way. Lauren, you know I love you. But this is just how it has to be right now. And I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But the distance between us kept growing. And I didn't know how to fix it. And then, there was Ethan. Our son. My baby. He's 18 now. But sometimes, I still see the little boy who used to climb into bed with us on Saturday mornings, begging for pancakes. He's always been so much like his father. Smart. Driven. But lately, he's changed. He's quieter. More distant. Like he's trying to figure out who he is. Where he fits in the world. Teenagers, right? One minute he's asking for advice. The next he's rolling his eyes. Like I'm the most clueless person on the planet. But I get it. I remember what it's like to be that age. To feel like no one understands you. To want to break free. To find your own path. I just wish I knew how to reach him. How to let him know. I'm here. I see you. I love you. But sometimes, feels like I'm failing at that too. The moment I realized something was missing. Our family used to feel like a team. Like we were in this together. But now, it's like we're all living separate lives under the same roof. Daniel buried in his work. Ethan pulling away. And me just trying to hold it all together. I didn't realize how lonely I was. Until that day on the metro. Until I looked around and realized how much I had been missing. How much I had been ignoring. And how much I wanted more. The admission is quiet. Almost a whisper. But it carries the weight of everything I've been holding back. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday, just an ordinary Tuesday. Ethan and I were on our way downtown. He had an appointment. I had some errands to run. The metro was packed. As usual, people crammed together, everyone in their own little world. I was standing near the door, facing the window. Ethan was behind me. At first it didn't seem unusual. The train was crowded. People were bumping into each other. I felt someone brush against me, but I didn't think much of it. It happens all the time on the metro. But then, it happened again. And again. This time it was different. It wasn't just a bump. It was deliberate. I froze. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it was just the movement of the train. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. And the moment I realized who it was, everything shattered. When everything started to fall apart, the growing tension with Ethan, the feeling of being invisible in my own life, it all came crashing down in those few minutes on the train. And it was only the beginning. I couldn't confront him. Not then. Not on the metro. I couldn't. My mind was a mess. One part of me wanted to scream, to turn around and demand an explanation. But another part of me, I don't know. Maybe I was afraid. Afraid of what I'd see in his eyes. Afraid of what it would mean if I acknowledged it. So I stayed silent. I got off the train. And I walked away. For days I couldn't stop thinking about it. I replayed it over and over in my head. Every detail. Every second. I kept asking myself, did I imagine it? Did I misinterpret it? But deep down, I knew I hadn't. It was real. And it was intentional. Then the guilt set in. I started questioning myself. Had I done something to make him think this was okay? Had I been too casual? Too affectionate? Had I blurred some line without realizing it? I went over every interaction we'd ever had, searching for answers. But the more I thought about it, the more confused I became. I couldn't find a reason. I couldn't find an excuse. And then came the shame. I couldn't tell Daniel. How could I? What would he think? Think of me? Of Ethan? And Ethan? I couldn't face him. Not after what happened. Not after what I was feeling. I started questioning everything. My role as a mother. My role as a woman. Had I failed him? Had I failed myself? I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that I felt lost. Like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. And one wrong step would send me tumbling into the abyss. Everything changed at home. I couldn't look at Ethan the same way. Every time he walked into the room, I felt this unease. Like I didn't know how to act around him anymore. I avoided being too close to him. I stopped hugging him. I stopped touching him altogether. Even a casual pat on the shoulder felt wrong. I told myself it was temporary, that I just needed time to process. But the truth? I didn't know if I'd ever feel comfortable around him again. And Ethan noticed. Of course he did. How could he not? He started giving me these looks. Confused. Hurt. Sometimes even angry. But he didn't say anything. Not at first. And neither did I. We just existed in this strange, uncomfortable silence. It was like there was a wall between us. And neither of us knew how to break it down. Even Daniel started noticing. He'd come home from work and see us sitting at the dinner table, not saying a word to each other. What's going on? He'd ask. But I couldn't tell him. How could I? How could I explain something I didn't even understand myself? So I brushed it off. It's just teenage stuff. Ethan's going through a phase. And Daniel, he bought it, or maybe he just didn't want to deal with it either. Either way, he didn't push. He just went back to work. Like he always did. I started spending more time alone. I'd go for long walks after work, just to clear my head. Sometimes I'd sit in the park for hours watching people go by, wondering if they had secrets too. If they were carrying the same kind of pain. It was easier to be around strangers than to be at home. At least with strangers, I didn't have to pretend. And then, I met Max. His name was Maximus Vasquez. New at work, charming, confident, and always seemed to know the right thing to say. At first, I didn't think much of him. He was just another colleague. But then one day, he noticed something was off. I don't even remember what it was. Maybe I looked tired. Or maybe I was quieter than usual. Whatever it was, he picked up on it. And he asked, "Are you okay?" Just like that, and no pretense. No small talk. Just a simple, genuine question. And for some reason, I told him the truth. Not everything, of course, but enough. I told him I was going through a rough time, that I felt lost. And he listened. Really listened. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer advice. He just let me talk. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone actually saw me. And then, everything changed. First it was innocent. A quick chat in the break room. A joke shared over coffee. But then, it became more. Lunch breaks turned into long conversations. Work projects turned into shared goals. And before I knew it, I was looking forward to seeing him, to talking to him, to being around him. Maximus was different from Daniel. He was attentive, present. He noticed the little things. The way I fidgeted when I was nervous. The way I smiled even when I wasn't happy. And he cared. Not in the way Daniel used to care. Back when we were young. Back when we were in love. But in a way that made me feel valued, seen, wanted. And after so long in the shadows, it was hard to let that go. I didn't plan for it to happen. I didn't go looking for it. But it happened anyway. And no matter how much I tried to fight it, I couldn't deny how it made me feel alive. And that was the beginning of something I never expected. When everything fell apart, the way Maximus made me feel seen, valued, like I mattered. After so long feeling invisible in my own life, it was intoxicating. But it was also terrifying. Because I knew what it meant. I knew where it could lead. And I didn't know if I was ready for that. I tried to fight it. I told myself it was just a friendship. That I was just lonely. That it would pass. But the more time I spent with him, the harder it became to deny what I was feeling. I was torn. Torn between my loyalty to Daniel, to my family, and this need to feel alive again. To feel something other than the emptiness that had taken over my life. Then came the argument. Daniel and I had been drifting further and further apart. And that night, it all came to a head. He came home late. Again. And I snapped. I told him how I felt. How alone I was. How invisible. But he didn't get it. He just dismissed it. Told me I was overreacting. That I didn't understand how hard he was working. And something in me broke. I walked out. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. And somehow, I ended up at Maximus's door. I didn't plan it. I didn't think about it. I just went. And when he opened the door, I didn't have to say anything. He saw it all on my face. And he didn't ask questions. He didn't push. He just let me in. What happened next? I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't planned. It wasn't calculated. It just happened. And in that moment, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Like I was finally letting go. Letting go of all the pain. All the loneliness. All the emptiness. But even as it was happening, I knew it was wrong. I knew I was crossing a line I could never uncross. And yet, I didn't stop. The morning after, I felt everything. Guilt. Shame. Relief. Validation. It was like a storm of emotions, all crashing into me at once. I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to make sense of it. All I knew was, something had changed. Something inside me. And I didn't know if I could go back. At home everything fell apart. Daniel and I barely spoke. And when we did, it was tense. Cold. Like we were strangers sharing a house. Not a life. I tried to pretend everything was normal. But it wasn't. How could it be? I was carrying this secret. This weight. And it was eating me alive. Ethan noticed. He had always been observant. Even as a kid. But now, he was watching me. Really watching. Like he could see right through me. "Are you okay, Mom?" His voice was careful. Like he already knew the answer. But I lied. "I'm fine. Just work. Just stress." But he didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. And it killed me. Knowing I was adding to whatever he was already dealing with. But I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to fix anything. Maximus wanted more. He wanted me to choose. To decide. to admit what I wanted. But I couldn't. I was torn between the life I had and the life I thought I wanted, between the guilt of what I'd done and the relief of finally feeling seen. And the more he pushed, the more I realized I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I had to make a decision, but every time I tried, I froze. Then it all came crashing down. Daniel found out. I don't know how. Maybe he sensed it. Maybe he had been suspicious all along. But one night, he confronted me. He had found a text. Something small. Something I thought I deleted. But it was enough. Is it true? His voice was low. Calm. Dangerously calm. And for the first time, I couldn't lie. Not anymore. The fight that changed everything. The argument was explosive. All the things we had been holding back came pouring out. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal. It was like this dam had broken, and there was no stopping it. He yelled. I yelled. And in the middle of it all, I realized something. This wasn't just about the affair. This was about everything. The distance, the loneliness, the years of feeling like I didn't matter. And for the first time, I said it all. Every last bit of it. But the worst part wasn't the fight. It was what happened after. Ethan overheard. I didn't realize he was home. I didn't realize he was listening. But when I saw his face, it shattered me. He looked at me like he didn't even know who I was. And maybe he didn't. Maybe I didn't either. Then, or the beginning, Daniel left that night. He didn't say where he was going. He just walked out. And Ethan, he didn't say a word. He just went to his room, closed the door, and I was left standing there, wondering how it had all gone so wrong. Now there's no going back. No fixing it. No pretending it hadn't happened. The life I built, crumbling around me, and I have no one to blame but myself. But even as I stand in the wreckage, I can't help but wonder, was this the end? Or was it the beginning of something else?